Everybody, welcome into Concrete Jungle, a New York baseball podcast here on FingerLakes1.com. I'm Paul Russo. I'm from my desk space at the offices of FingerLakes1.com. Kyle Evans, as always, with me. He is at his home studio here in the beautiful Finger Lakes region. Kyle, happy Friday. Well, recording Friday here and hopefully live on Friday, but how's everything going for you?
It's going great. I mean, this is the last Friday without baseball, regular season baseball for I don't even know when, but it's awesome. I can't wait. The season can't come soon enough.
Yeah, so a couple housekeeping notes about that. Be back to our two-a-week schedule starting next week. Normally, as people, if you're longtime listeners know, Monday and Thursdays are our dates. Next week, it will be Tuesday, Thursday, just scheduling stuff between the both of us that we'll have to kind of take out. But I'll preview the seasons next week for the teams. And then, like I said, we'll be back to our 2 days here as we get going. So let's jump right in. We'll begin actually with the New York Mets side of things here as we started, I think, with the Yankees last time, but either way, try and keep things alternate and fair. We'll begin with the Mets top prospect, Francisco Alvarez, the catcher. Earlier this week was optioned to AAA Syracuse. That's where he will be starting his 2023 season. This spring, Alvarez was batting a slash line of 107, 194, and 107. That was through 14 games. So not great. The Mets will be going with a platoon system of Tomas, Nido, and free agent signee Omar Narvaez. It's interesting. We saw Alvarez at the big league level at the end of last year and into the Met playoff run. Um, Despite the struggles, it still caught me a little bit off guard, admittedly. I kind of figured that they'd go with a bit of a sink or swim potentially type deal with Alvarez to at least start the year. And that's not going to be the case. Maybe that's just my own personal philosophy, kind of clouding my judgment here, but it's definitely something that actually caught me off guard.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like you said, they stuck with him at the end of last season, and now to open up the season, they're not going to stick with him. It's kind of shocking, I would say is the word. But I guess the reason being would probably be the offensive struggles. They figured, well, they better go and send him down to AAA and get some more at bats because maybe he wouldn't play every day either. Omar Narvaez had a good offensive year last year, so we'll see how long it takes for them to call Alvarez back up. But it definitely was shocking to start the year off.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Navarez, I wouldn't technically call him a journeyman catcher. He stuck on with the Brewers over the course of the past few seasons and really became a really good offensive catcher. I think he kind of sneaks in at that average to maybe catches you off guard as being a decent defensive backstop back there. Obviously, we know what Tomas Nido is. It's interesting. I don't want to get too far ahead because we do have updates to the Syracuse Mets roster that we will be touching on here as we get to the end of the episode. Uh, but it's interesting because Nick Meyer, who went back and forth kind of between Binghamton and Syracuse last year, another catching prospect for the Mets, not as high up as Alvarez is, but a guy who really did make an impact, and that's the interesting part about it. You brought up how he might not be playing all the time, full time at the big league level. Not to say I'm not convinced he wouldn't be at Syracuse. He'll be in the lineup no matter what at Syracuse, whether it's DH or catching. It's just one of those things where I look at him like, well, Nick Mayer's definitely the plus defender out of the two. Like, what is the plan at this point with Alvarez? It's kind of, I wouldn't say concerning, but it has me wondering, is the guy that we thought not the trade piece or trade bait piece, is he actually that piece now?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what the situation is, but if we don't see him within the first couple of months, then I would start to really wonder what his future is with this organization. Would he be a trade piece at the deadline, in the summer? Um, Also, though, I feel like maybe they should give him more time at the big league level. Yeah, he did spend some time at the end of last year, but maybe not enough. I mean, he is still very young, so maybe you let him come up, in the beginning of the summer and see what he can do.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, and that's one of those things too where we know how baseball is. He'll probably be up even if, say, Navarez or Nido don't get hurt. But say, I'm not saying this in news, just say Pete Alonso gets hurt. I mean, Alvarez would presumably be that next guy up in my mind, um, just for the bat purposes of it alone. I mean, obviously, I think it remains to be seen, right? What happens with Vientos, what happens with Beatty. I mean, that's probably stuff that we'll know, obviously, when we get to next week and not obviously today. So it's definitely one of those interesting things that there's a lot of different factors, to say the least, kind of surrounding it. And again, not to go, I don't want to go too far deep because it's just it's funny how one of our main headlines involves Syracuse, which we talk about obviously within the podcast later on. But the Mets have a lot of questions here coming up about roster spots anyway. A lot of guys who probably didn't expect to have, maybe, I wouldn't say great springs, but as good as springs as they're having, they are having. And guys who that they probably figured would bake the opening day roster are a bit in question. A guy like Daniel Volpe kind of comes to mind right now. I don't think they'd cut him or anything like that next week, but Vogie's struggling right now in spring, and that's a bat that he's very limited against lefties, as we know. Um, again, potential spot if he goes down, right? Alvarez to me is that plug-in spot at that point.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't see why you couldn't get Alvarez some DH at bats,
Mhm.
mix him in at catcher a little bit. Um, I think there is at bats to be had. I just really think they're not comfortable right now, which is just shocking to me. Like I said, they had him at the end of last year, and now they're going to put him in AAA. It's just a weird move.
Yeah. Let's transition over to some positive news that the Mets have had, and fans definitely will enjoy. Brandon Nimmo, uh, it's funny because I did these notes yesterday and before the Mets played their spring training game. Uh, you know, I suppose there is technically a question still about his availability for opening day. Hopeful is still the term that I think is being used. But so Nimmo left the spring training game versus the Marlins last Friday. Tweaked his left ankle, sliding into second base. Um, Hobbled off, very much so in pain at the moment, but they consider it just a sprain. They did some imaging, no structural damage, no nothing like that. So that's a big plus. Plus, and then, like I mentioned, I did these notes yesterday before their spring training, and he ends up having I think it was a stand-up triple or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think
So,
it was like a two-run triple.
I mean, I would say he's going to be good to go for opening day, but it does beg a question here because, um, you know, health is a big part of this, and we know about the New York teams and their, we'll call it lack of luck every now and then in that sense. So with Nimmo obviously avoiding major injury, big plus here for the Mets heading into the beginning of April in the season here.
Yeah, after that Diaz injury, you see Nimmo go down, and you're like, wow, is this going to be the season of, nothing but injuries? But turns out Nimmo was okay, and great news for them because he is a big bat in that lineup and really is a reason why they had so much success last year.
Especially too, I mean, it goes without mentioning. You look at what happened within the NL East here yesterday. Rhys Hoskins goes down, done for the year with a non-contact left knee injury. I believe they said it's going to be reconstructive. I believe if I saw that right. So obviously that sucks, but it goes to show just how crucial each player is. Now I think Nimmo is better than say Rhys Hoskins. Hoskins is a big bat in that Philly lineup, similar to the way that Nimmo kind of anchors what really is the power portion of, in my mind, the top part of that lineup, typically in that two spot. Um, I mean, hell, he even led off a little bit last year, if I remember right. So I mean, it's a big escape for the Mets going into next week, and it kind of plays into what I mentioned already. Like, it takes away probably a roster spot for somebody for the first couple weeks because he's going to avoid the injured list. He's going to avoid the major time off, especially too. I mean, if he looked the way he did yesterday, I wouldn't even classify it as hopeful. He is going to be in the opening day lineup. That's how I would call it.
Yeah, if he were to start the season on the injured list, I don't know about you, but I would assume the way Tim LeCastro swinging the
Yeah.
bat, he would be the guy that would probably get a spot. And, it's probably a little frustrating to him right now, but at the same time, he doesn't want his teammates getting injured for him to make a spot. He wants to earn a spot right out. But yeah, I think we probably will see LeCastro sometime in the year.
Yeah, and that's a name that obviously we'll be talking about here in a little bit anyway. Let's talk about the Yankees here. Some different positional and roster stuff kind of going on with them. We'll start with what is now being considered utility man, Isiah Kiner-Falefa. Played in the outfield for the first time last week, specifically center field. Uh, 4 putouts in 2 innings. He did throw to the wrong base once, which that'll happen. But uh, a quote from IKF after the game. I was a little nervous going into it just because it was a new position, but it was a lot of fun. It's just a matter of relaxing. Um, so not to allude too much here because a key part in this is the next talking point really. But look, his playing time is going to be compromised, no matter what. Here, shortstop's the big spot for him, obviously, in that sense. Um, but and this is where I want to give IKF a lot of credit. He wants to be part of the winning formula. He wants to try and figure this out. And to that end as well, he is scheduled to get catching reps again in the coming days. He came up as a catching prospect with the Rangers, transitioned over to third where he got his gold glove, went to short with the Rangers a little bit, and then the Yankees. So look, he's a guy who can pretty much, to me, I wouldn't say play everywhere, but is more than willing to do what's best for the team and for him to be involved.
Yeah, that's definitely cool to see. It kind of caught me by surprise though with him playing the outfield, only because if you watch him at shortstop, he doesn't have the best of arms. His arm strength is not great. I mean, that's kind of why he struggled there, especially last year. So, I feel like he's more of a second base guy, and there's no room for him at second base every day. I mean, once in a while you could sprinkle him in there, but yeah, it just kind of caught me by surprise that he was playing in the outfield. I guess he hasn't done a terrible job. Like you said, he made one little, I guess, error you could say. He's starting in center field again today. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I also didn't really think he'd be still part of the team. I really thought that he'd be traded by now. I just feel like there's too many pieces and not enough spots for him.
I mean, there have been rumblings the past couple of days I've noticed involving him again.
And I guess it still could happen, really,
Yeah,
any
yeah.
minute.
And for what? I don't know what you get for him at this point. I don't know if it's one of those like maybe deals that the Yankees kind of swung to get Jose Trevino in last year, where it's you're kind of just bringing in not low level guy, but a guy who can kind of come in, maybe just be that role guy playing off the bench. Obviously, Trevino's played himself into being the starting catcher for the Yankees through obviously the early part of last season. He's going to carry that through, but it's interesting because the other guy involved in the trade last year with Isiah Kiner-Falefa is a guy who polar opposite, and maybe it's just because of where they are in their careers, maybe. But I was thinking about this portion of it today because I didn't think about this aspect of it. But to me, like I said, I give a lot of credit to IKF. Look, struggled, didn't play the way he wanted to play. If you look at actually his slash line offensively, it was actually on par for what he's always done. He
Contact.
and very very similar. I think he was maybe like a couple points off, like average wise to what he had been in his career, but it was very much so on the same track. Like not anything that was like egregious. Defensively, yeah, that's where he struggled. But to me, he's a Gold Glover. Baseball, as we know, is a game of momentum and streaks. Like something like that may happen, but I can't imagine a guy who's Gold Glove falls off that way. But getting back to the main point, the fact he's willing to try and put in the effort to make himself useful for the team is huge to me. Um, Compared to Donaldson, who has been, I don't want to say a stick in the mud, but he's like, this is my role here, and I'm not moving off of it.
Yeah, and you do want to have a few guys that are like that can move around anywhere. I mean, injuries pop up anytime in any game, and if you have a guy like that, you're not stuck at putting one player at one position. I feel like the situation kind of relates to Stanton and Judge. Stanton at times couldn't play the outfield, so they kind of switched the entire lineup. But now if you can have guys that can play almost everywhere, that's really cool to see. Kind of what they're doing with Oswaldo Cabrera.
Yeah,
He's kind of moving around everywhere too, and that's good for the team.
yeah, and I mean, I know IKF has said that he doesn't expect to be the everyday center fielder or anything like that. Um, but he expects, if there's a spot for him to go in there, he can do it. I think there's also mentioned that um, center field is where they're going to primarily keep him. But some of the places, say Houston was brought up as an example. If they're in Houston, he could probably play left field. Um, they said something like Camden Yards might be off limits because of the space now in left field or something like that. But the places where he can corral better, you can. There's no be added opportunity at the end of the day for him.
Yeah. And if he doesn't get moved now, maybe he does at the deadline. Who knows?
Yeah. And look, I want to give him more run. I don't know if it's like the my own personal liking towards him. But like I was a big fan of getting him over. I didn't like the fact we gave up Gio Urshela,
Yeah.
if within that. But look, like I said, he's a Gold Glove defender, plus defense. I know last year wasn't the best year or example of it. But I just don't think that goes away. I think it's one of those years. And I think he'll get over it and move on. Um, and it's going to be one of those deals where, in my mind, for him, say he does get traded, I want to see him succeed. He's been a guy who, like I said, he's clearly putting in that effort. It's not like I said, it's not like Donaldson, who's very much so sticking the mudding it and kind of just pretty much being the old man, if you will.
Yep. You have to ride and die with Donaldson at third.
Yeah. All right. So let's stay on that side of the infield now because I alluded to it a little bit. Shortstops, uh, more or less appears to be up for grabs. Sorry about that. I had a insect intruder disappear on my lap. So beauty of production, everybody. Anyway, shortstop appears to be up for grabs. More or less, it's a two-person battle right now between Oswald Peraza, who we saw last year at the end of the year, and top prospect Anthony Volpe. The battle per Aaron Boone was going to come down to the final days of spring training. Volpe has the edge offensively right now, slashing 308, 438, and 590 this spring. Peraza lower at 207, 343, and 379. That being said, look, we do have a, albeit small, sample size of what Peraza's done at the big league level. Volpe, we don't know, hasn't gotten above Double-A yet. But this is kind of one of those things where do we do the sink or swim element with Volpe, or do we do the safe route, start him at Scranton for the year, and then just kind of ride with Peraza more than likely at short? It's an interesting kind of conundrum for the Yankees here.
Yeah, see, I like both guys. I would be okay with either one, but I do believe based on his spring training performance and the confidence that this kid's bringing every day, that Volpe should earn a spot on the opening day roster and start at shortstop. The bat for Peraza hasn't been there too much this spring, but when that guy gets hot, he's a really good hitter, contact hitter. Has some speed on him, can really play defense. I like both of their games, but I do believe Volpe should start at shortstop.
Yeah, I think he's more than earned it this spring so far. I think the tough part I have is, and we haven't seen it all that much recently, but these top prospects who kind of come up struggle out of the gate, and whether the big leagues, the club kind of mishandles them a little bit and send them down, whether it's too late, too soon. I mean, the guy that sticks out to me recently has been probably Jared Kelenic for the Mariners, in a way. And that's the thing, right? I mean, it's interesting because like the Braves, for example, I don't know if you saw this, but they optioned Von Grissom.
Oh, I didn't see that. That's
Yeah, they
interesting.
optioned him down to Triple A Gwinnett this week, and I just like I'm sitting there going like, but you need a shortstop, so that tells me that. And mind you, I haven't paid too deep attention to the Braves this spring as much as I maybe kind of should have, as we kind of prep for our predictions and previews and stuff like that. But like he's better than Orlando Arcia in my mind. So like I don't know. But like I said, I mean each team has a different philosophy. The Yankees, in my mind, tend to be more conservative in a way, which is why, as much as I do think Volpe has earned that right, do the Yankees see that as well. And that's what I kind of worry about. Where I I think I'm with you. I, I would go Volpe, but I think what the Yankees are going to do is they're going to go Peraza.
Yeah, see, I've kind of thought the way you're thinking right now all along until recently. I thought there was no way Volpe would start the season on the roster
Mm.
based on how the Yankees operate with their prospects. But now, the way I'm hearing rumblings and stuff on Twitter and just different things, I think there's a legit shot now, and it's actually surprising to me.
And maybe this is a little bit of, I wouldn't say, I mean, it's not a new regime in New York. Like it's not like the Yankees went out and put a bunch of new people in positions. But look, there's different people around Cashman. I mean, Brian Sabian's kind of the main one. Omar and I, or yeah, is it Omar? I think it's there a little bit, but like Brian Sabian's there. And look, I think Hal finally cracked a little bit, and he's kind of frankly pissed off that the Yankees haven't done what the winning that they expect to do since 2009. And so I think maybe this is a little bit of it where maybe they do just say, all right, let's just roll with Volpe, right? Clearly, at least in these small sample sizes, he gives us the best chance to win, and that's what we're going with.
Yeah, and there was actually a report, I don't know if you saw it this morning
No.
from The Athletic. Um, According to multiple sources, Volpe has been getting support from the high-level voices within the Yankees in his bid to win the opening day shortstop job. Nothing's been decided, but the higher up voices are really trying to get him on the roster.
Yeah, so that's a huge plus for him, man. I mean, that's beyond plus plus. So, about to say, I know Garrett Cole kind of weighed in. I think he kind of did the diplomatic thing when he was asked about it a few days ago. It's like, well, they're both playing good and stuff like that, and blah blah blah. But you know, I think I think internally, if they're saying what they're saying about Volpe, that's I want to say I don't want to say the decision's already made up, but it's probably something along that lines of 80 to 85%. It's a done deal.
Yeah, and the reporters today were kind of saying that Peraza went with the split squad over on the road in Sarasota, and
Oh,
Volpe stayed home with
well,
Garrett Cole on the mound.
so
So that kind of maybe favors Volpe right now.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we're a week out from opening day uh, for both teams, so obviously we'll know more next week about kind of everything and where everything's kind of setting. And like I said, when we do our previews on both the teams, we should know more then. So before we do get out of here, let's talk about our minor league clubs here in the area of Rochester and Syracuse. Uh, so we've gotten through the weeks here that their rosters are taking shape as well. Let's begin over in Rochester. Um, they're in an interesting spot because I think their roster is a very much so. I don't want to say win now. Minor leagues is where you're technically develop, but their roster is a very win nowish style roster. Excuse me, for AAA. So here are their listed returners right now. And hey, look, obviously the big preface of this, right, is stuff can change, especially
Yeah.
with the final coming days here of spring training. But this is who they got notably on their return roster right now. Right-handed pitchers Corey Abbott, Jordan Weems, Yohan Adon, Jackson Tatro, infielders Jake Alud, Jake Knoll, Lucius Fox. So all names that we know about from last year, big contributors, especially to me on the pitching staff. There's a couple other guys on there too. I saw like Baldonado, uh, and guys like that who are probably those career AAA guys at this point. But those are, in my mind, the key six guys coming back. And look, a guy like it's especially to me like Jordan Weems, who Washington did use a little bit at the end of last year, but was the saves leader for the Red Wings, kind of a key part of that bullpen. That's a big spot because they start out so good, and when Washington kind of started doing the roster changes, that's really when Rochester, we saw them go on that 19-game losing streak in June, and they just never could quite recover to get up back above 500 after that.
Yeah, and then sprinkle in a couple of injuries to, I believe it was Andrew Stevenson for a little bit.
Yeah, Jake Knoll.
Guys, guys like that. But yeah, one thing I noticed with the Red Wings, it's so cool that they bring in a lot of guys that have played in the majors, more so than the Mets, Syracuse Mets do, it seems like. So it's kind of cool to see the rosters and think about where I've seen these guys before.
Yeah, and that's go. Let's with that in mind, let's talk about some of those new guys coming in because they have a blend of those major leaguers and a blend of former top prospects from other teams. Outfielder Stone Garrett from the Arizona Diamondbacks organization is now within Washington's organization. Second base, and this is the interesting part. They have him listed as a second baseman. Michael Chavis
Oh, wow.
is listed on the Rochester roster. First baseman Matt Adams
Wow.
making a slight comeback, making the trip west on the thruway. Infielder Travis Blankenhorn.
Hey, I just looked that up because I actually didn't, I thought maybe that was a typo. I didn't
No,
think that happened.
it did. It
It's,
did.
it's
Former
different.
former Tiger top prospect Derek Hill, Alex Colomé, reliever. Also, here's a name for me and you, especially former Yankee prospect Blake Rutherford,
Oh, yeah.
home in
I
the
saw that
outfield.
name right away.
And right-hand pitcher Chad Kuhl, former Pirate, was with the Rockies last year. And Sean Doolittle as well. He's on the Rochester roster, but it is known that he's just not far along enough in his rehab yet. He'll start, I think the year is still down at the Florida complex before coming up to Rochester. But um, it's such a blend of in my mind, you're gonna have those top prospects like Jacob Lou at this point, Lucius Fox, those type of guys, but a lot of big league experience within Rochester this coming season, at least to start anyway.
Yeah, another thing with the Red Wings too is, with their major league team, not in a good position right now. There's a lot more movement, I feel like, than the Syracuse Mets. I
Mhm.
mean, the Mets big league team pretty much kind of has their roster set for almost the entire year unless there's injuries. Or
Yeah,
the Nationals, they're kind of moving up and down all the time. Just bringing in guys, seeing what guys are about, and that's kind of what makes the Red Wings, maybe lack consistency with their winning
yeah.
because of the movements.
Well, and I think a key part of that, to go back to a couple podcasts ago when the coaching staffs are announced, I mean, you can tell the Rochester coaching staff, it's two different philosophies. One's not better than the other here, but the coaching staff for the Red Wings is very much so honing the skills that you already have, whereas the Syracuse staff this year is very noticeably development, development, development. Um, a lot of the analytics guys have coaching jobs this year at Syracuse. We mentioned, right? Whether it's flatline or the pitching stuff there. So let's travel back on the throughway, head back to Syracuse, take a look at their roster. Notable returners, already mentioned them off the top, Francisco Alvarez and Nick Mayer. Outfielder Khalil Lee is back technically at the moment. There's a lot of off the field stuff kind of surrounding him at the moment. I don't know how much we're going to see of him, admittedly, if at all. Yeah, it's one of those if you don't know, um, his ex-girlfriend has filed some trying to get domestic violence charges charged against him in Syracuse. So there's a lot behind the scenes involving him. Like I said, don't know how much we're going to really actually see of him, if at all. And we could be wrong. He may be there all year at one of those things. In pitchers, Connor Gray and Jose Buto. Those are really the key returners. And one of those things, I did expect Mike Montgomery back. I did expect Trevor Cahill back. The guys coming back were more than likely going to be these younger guys who uh, are more or less on their journey to Queens or elsewhere in the big leagues.
Yeah, and it's always seems like pitching with both of these teams. You never know what you're going to get from the starting pitching, and that kind of affects the team's records. I think the offense is always there for
Yeah.
both of these teams, but it's really the pitching depth that they don't really usually have. And we'll see if it's a little different this year, but normally it really hits the Syracuse Mets.
Yeah. Some new players for the Syracuse Mets this year include left-hand pitcher Joey Lucchesi, obviously came over in a trade with the Padres last offseason. Didn't pitch really at all last year, was able to rehab with Port St. Lucie a little bit, but this is all part of the process for him to get back to the big leagues, so he'll be starting the year at Syracuse. Former Oriole prospect DJ Stewart in the outfield. We already mentioned Tim Castro. Left-hand pitcher TJ McFarland.
Another name that's been around.
Yeah. Jimmy Yacobonis, again, a former Oriole prospect. Abraham Almonte, an outfielder, and shortstop Jose Peraza on the Met roster as well for Syracuse. So, again, not this portion of it, not as I'd say heavy or as heavy as Rochester's, but a good one of guys who have played at the big league level who will certainly be able to assist. And really, to me, guys who are trying to get back to the big leagues. Like a guy like Yacobonis was pitching for Miami and Tampa Bay last year. I mean, he's looking to try and get back to the big leagues. Um, I look at both those rosters coming back, and really I see more potential May free agents that we see out of these guys with service time out of Syracuse than I do Rochester. Really, the only one I'd say at Rochester, I think might jump Alex Colomé, maybe Chad Kuhl, depending upon what happens. But you look at Syracuse to me, I could see a guy like McFarland trying to Yacobonis, even Almonte. We know Jose Peraza definitely can. He did that with the Yankees last year when he was at Scranton. So um, the Mets, like you said, Kyle, they know what they're doing at their AAA level, what they're doing there. They do bring in those big league guys, but it's a destination spot for their prospects, not for guys trying to get back to the league.
Yeah, like I said, it's gonna be interesting to see what kind of movement goes on with Syracuse. It's just way less than Rochester. I mean, every day it seemed like we were getting moves for Rochester, and every maybe once or twice a week for Syracuse. So if everyone stays healthy, I expect the Syracuse roster to pretty much stay the same. I think the first guy up for if there was an injury to a reliever would be Jimmy Yacobonis. That would be
Yeah,
my guy.
yeah, he's
But
kind of a swing guy in that sense.
and I don't know exactly, but I think he has more experience than TJ McFarland does at the big league level
Um, I
in
wouldn't be
terms of
surprised if
games,
they're
maybe.
maybe, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they're neck and neck. I mean, McFarland's been more of a specialized relief guy because he is a lefty, but I mean, obviously now we're what year 3 with that rule where you have to have the 3 outs. Or 3 batters faced rather that because I remember him with like the White Sox and the A's, McFarland. I think a little bit with the Diamondbacks too, if I remember right. But yeah, I don't know. Jacobowitz I think would probably have technically more miles. I don't know about appearance necessarily, but definitely more miles than McFarland.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting.
And I mean, I think it's going to be pretty cool. I mean, LeCastro, a little bit of the homecoming, right, from Auburn, played college ball in Ithaca, and he's going to be playing in Syracuse. That's a one hell of a little bit of a story here on his journey at this point.
Yeah, and he already played for the Yankees. Now he has a chance
Yeah.
to play for the Mets. I mean, he's a New York guy. He has to love what's going on with his life right now.
I bet you would prefer a little bit if he was right at Queens to start the year, but yeah, I definitely agree with you overall on that sentiment anyway. All right, so that will do it for Concrete Jungle for today. Like we said at the beginning, a couple housekeeping notes if you're just jumping in now. Um, back to 2 episodes next week. There'll be Tuesday, Thursday for those as opposed to Monday, Thursday, just because of scheduling for us. But back to 2, previewing the teams next week each day. Looking forward to it. Opening day next week. Can't beat it. One of our favorite times of year to say the least.
Yeah, I really can't wait. I'm counting down every hour.
I know the thing is with you, I know that's accurate. So,
Yeah.
all right, Kyle, appreciate you taking the time as always here for this and enjoy the weekend for you. I know you're not going to be doing any March Madness too much, but I bet you'll have it at least in the background for you a little bit.
Hey, I've been watching a lot more games, and last night those games are pretty entertaining, especially the late one when Gonzaga held on. It was
Yeah,
just a fun game.
yeah, absolutely. It's why this is madness. This is March.
Yep.
So, as always, if you can't catch us at the time of live or premiere, you can catch up anytime on YouTube or FavoriteRace1.com, Spotify, and Spotify for podcasters now as Anchor has gone bye-bye and RIP to Anchor. So until next Tuesday, enjoy the weekend, everybody, and we will talk to everybody then.